Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel, Bandy's Books. Today we are here to talk about my TBR for January. So if you've been following this channel, you know that I have chronically struggled with completing my TBRs. In October, November, and December, I pretty much completely failed. I would set up like 10 to 15 books, read one or two of them, and then be like, squirrel! And pretty much want to read everything that was not on my list. So in 2022, I am working on being much better about that. My goal is to complete each TBR that I set, and I think it's reasonable. I'm in a place right now that I have a lot more free reading time, so I should be able to get through a lot more books than I was prior to this year. I also like to theme out my TBRs. If you're new, each month I pick a different theme. I try to balance this between things that I really, really love, favorites like historical fiction, fantasy, stuff like that, and things that are more challenging for me. Like last October, I did an all horror month for spooky season. I, prior to that, had not really read a whole lot of horror, actually thought I didn't like horror very much, and turns out I was wrong. I really enjoyed it. February coming up, I'm going to be doing romance, which is my least favorite genre. And so that'll be a big challenge for me to find books that are romance that I enjoy, kind of expand my horizons, push myself to read things that are outside of my comfort zone. So I kind of try to rotate a little bit to give myself a break and then push myself a little bit. So I thought I would start the year with a genre that I love. It's one of my wheelhouse genres, something that I find myself reaching for a lot, and that is fantasy. The reason that I picked fantasy to start January is A, that it's enjoyable for me. I want to start the year off on a good place with something that's fun, maybe not so challenging right away, where I can just focus on let's get the quantity of books in that I want to get in, get back in that habit of reading more. And then B, I have a ton of fantasy books, physical copies of fantasy books sitting around my house. I have a book organizational video that's going to come up in the next week or two, like a spring cleaning thing, but you'll see I have 250 books sitting in my living room and like in my shelves in here, and a large chunk of them are fantasy. So I thought, what better way to start than by clearing out a chunk of fantasy books. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the books. So I've got a couple stacks of books here. We're gonna start here on the left. The first book on this list is a book that my mom gave me a while back, like maybe a month ago. She said that she found it in a little free library, and she said it sounded like my jam. And based on the cover and the description, it does indeed sound like my jam. And that is The Midnight Queen by Sylvia Izzo Hunter. I had never heard of this book nor this author before, so this is a completely fresh start for me. And this book is about a character named Gray. He is at Merlin College. It's notoriously difficult to get into. Things are going okay, and then there is a catastrophe and a death, which he gets blamed for, and he is kicked out of college. Where he basically spends the summer with his professor, Appius Calendar, under his supervision. And he meets Appius's daughter, Sophie, and they kind of hit it off right away. And Sophie is super interested in magic. She wants to learn about magic, increase her knowledge and everything. There's only one problem. In this book, it is not legal it's frowned upon for women to know anything about magic, basically. And so Gray starts to teach Sophie and fill in these gaps in knowledge that she has, but he's digging himself into a ditch because this is technically against the rules. Catastrophe that happened to Gray while he was still at college might actually not have been so accidental. There might be some evil machinations going on in the background. So sounds really interesting. There's some mystery, some fantasy, possibly some romance. I love it when women break the rules, and I love it when there's a dude that supports her in breaking the rules. So I'm looking forward to this. This sounds like a fun read. Next up is a book that I know it's really popular. I know it's been made into movies, and I have somehow completely avoided really knowing too much about it. I know generally what it's about, but I haven't really seen the movie. I've seen a couple clips here and there, browsing TV and happen to stop and watch for a minute and then flip to something else. And then I've never really read any reviews or anything on it. I don't know why. It sounds interesting. I like the concept. I like fantasy, but I don't know why I've never dove into this series before. That is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom. That's this guy here. So this book is about this old, decrepit home that used to be a home for orphaned and abandoned children with magical abilities. I think there's a character named Jacob who is journeying to a remote island off the coast of Wales where he discovers the ruins of Miss Peregrine's home. I think that leads him into an exploration of these ruins and who the inhabitants of this home were. As you can see on the cover, there's a girl that's super strong, there's some creepy twins in the back, there's a floating girl and a guy that's got her tied to a rope, an invisible person, and someone that looks like she can control fire. So my guess is it's kind of like an X-Men sort of a vibe, you know, lots of kids with magical potential, and Miss Peregrine seems to be kind of like Xavier, the person that's teaching them and protecting them and whatnot. I am looking forward to getting into this. Maybe I will read the book and then watch the movie and do like a book versus movie comparison kind of a video. Sounds like a lot of fun. Next up is one of the books that I am most excited for this month. I'm so excited about it, in fact, that I've actually already started reading it. But that's not cheating because it's already January, so I wanted to get a jump on this. And it was also one of the sole reasons that I signed up for Book of the Month last month. So I have held off on getting a book subscription because I have so many books at home, literally like 250 in my living room right now that are sitting there unread that I'm going to be working through, you know, this year. And I didn't want to add to that by signing up for book subscriptions. But I've been eyeballing Book of the Month, and they have really good quality books. So when I saw that this book was on their offerings for December, this plus one other book, I finally broke down and signed up. So that book is A History of Wild Places by Chern. This book is magical realism, fantasy, and mystery kind of all mixed into one. This starts off with a character named Travis. Travis has a unusual sort of talent. Basically, he can pick up an item, say like this book, and he can kind of feel memories from it. He can track people via these last memories of whatever's happened to them. And because of those memories, he ends up being recommended by certain police officers to families of missing people in order to track them down, basically. And so he's kind of burned out on it. His sister has killed herself, and he couldn't save her. So now he's feeling like he can't really save anyone else. He's ready to just kind of run away from life. But his friend reaches out to him and calls him in to investigate the missing persons case of Maggie St. James. She's gone missing 5 years ago. She's a famous author, kind of controversial, and she just up and disappeared in this remote town. So Travis is sent out to investigate, to see if he can track her down. And I don't want to give a whole bunch away, but basically it involves this hippie community out in the woods. It's called Pastoral. There's some magical elements to it. It's suspected that she made it to Pastoral, but we don't know at this point. I am about 100 pages into this book so far, and I have to say it's so engaging, literally from the first page. The writing in this is so fantastic. It's very smooth, very descriptive. You feel very easily immersed in the story. There's enough information missing to keep it really interesting and mysterious, but not so much that it's very confusing and you're grappling with, I don't understand what's going on. I really, really highly recommend this book so far. I'm only 100 pages in. I think this is going to be probably my first 5-star read of the year. Next up is a book that I purchased back in October. I had, like I said, a spooky season themed TBR for October, and since it was my first month in social media, first month with Bookstagram and Booktube, I went a little overboard. I purchased something like 40 spooky season books, thinking, yeah, I'm just going to read 2 books a day, no problem. Totally overly optimistic, not realistic at all. And I was kind of just going nuts. I was like a kid in the candy store. There's so many gorgeous covers coming out. I don't know if you know or not, but last October was insane for book publishing. There's so many good books. So I ended up with all the books, and naturally I did not finish the TBR, so I have quite a few books that are still waiting to be read. So the next 2 books in this stack come from my spooky season book haul last year, and I'm finally getting around to reading them. The first of the 2 is The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This book is set in Ecuador, which I'm super excited about. I spent 3 months in Ecuador back in 2018, 2019, and I absolutely fell in love with the country. So anytime I get to read a book that is set there, that brings me back to my travels, I'm 100% on board. So that already had me sold before I heard about the story. Then I read the summary and everything, and this is about Orchidea Divina, who passes away, and she leaves her inheritance to her 4 children, I believe, or grandchildren, and they head back to Ecuador to deal with, the transference of her belongings, her burial, all the stuff that comes with death. And when they get back there, some things kind of turn up a little bit unusual. It puts them into a mystery of who Orchidea really was. She wasn't exactly the person they thought she was. And I believe that this is told in dual timelines, one in the past and one in the present. I have heard nothing but good things about it, and look how stunning this cover is. You're going to hear me saying that a lot throughout this video, and one thing I have to give fantasy credit for, and whether you're a fantasy reader or not, I hope you can acknowledge, because I know that there's some fantasy haters out there, and that's okay if it's not your cup of tea, but one thing I think we should universally acknowledge about fantasy is that it has the best covers. There are so many pretty covers in this stack, and it's not like I went out of my way to go find beautiful covers. I just, you find a good fantasy book and they tend to have really gorgeous covers. Anyways, back to that. I'm really looking forward to this. And fun fact, I didn't know this at the time, but I picked this up on its publishing day, which was so cool when I found out. Literally one of the first copies they had in the bookstore. And the final one in this stack is another book, like I said, from spooky season, and that's A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. I've heard really good things about this. This has some dark academia fantasy vibes. It is about a character named Felicity. Felicity is returning to school. What's the name of the school here? Dalloway, that's what it is. So she's returning to the Dalloway school after a year-long absence due to the death of her girlfriend. She is trying to just keep a low profile this year. She doesn't want involvement in anything that's going to cause her stress or, problems or anything. But this school has kind of a unique history. There were 5 witches that were killed in the school's history, called the Dalloway 5. And, Felicity's trying to stay away from that, but she keeps kind of getting dragged back in. There's a new girl that joins the school named Ellis. And Ellis right away becomes pretty popular, making a lot of friends and everything. And she reaches out to Felicity and asks her if she'll help her research the Dalloway 5. So even though Felicity's trying to take it easy, she's getting pulled into this mystery of who these Dalloway 5 were. Sounds like it's going to be super interesting. I had never really read too much dark academia prior to October last year, and I read a couple of them, and I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool vibe. So here we are, a witchy dark academia to add to my fantasy list. So I realized I didn't acknowledge at the beginning of the video this fabulous unicorn onesie that I am wearing. You may be wondering what the unicorn onesie is about, and I figured since we're talking about fantasy books and mythical creatures and all sorts of fun stuff, why would I not dress up as a unicorn? I mean, why would I not dress up as a unicorn regularly anyways? But especially when I'm talking about fantasy and magical creatures. See my horn up here somewhere? There it is. But I thought this was the right thing to wear while we're talking about fantasy books. So this next stack of books is a mix of books that I got from Little Free Libraries, Book Outlet, and a couple books that I got in a Secret Santa exchange in December. Let's start with the Secret Santa exchange. The first book from Secret Santa is Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This is a mermaid book. Simi is the name of the main character, and Simi is a mermaid who is in the ocean, and her job is to collect the souls of people who have died at sea or fallen overboard. One day, a child is tossed off the boat, and instead of taking his soul, she pushes him back up onto the boat. And this kind of sets off unbalancing of sorts. This is unheard of. She should have collected his soul and been done with it. And she has to go to the Supreme Creator in Mamiwata to make amends, basically. And this is going to be a difficult journey. She's going to, go through vengeful gods, treacherous lands, and legendary creatures. It sounds pretty epic. And again, another really beautiful cover. I'm looking forward to this. And the second book that came from this Secret Santa exchange is another mermaid story, A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Marrow. Both of these books came from my friend Sarah. Her handle is @ChileanFlair. So if you're into Bookstagram, you like really cool bookish accounts and really friendly, lovely people, you should follow Sarah. She is a lovely, lovely person. I'm going to include her handle in the description. So this one is about two friends, Tavia and Effie. Tavia is a siren, and the society that she lives in is not that excited about sirens. So she kind of has to keep her powers under wraps. She can't sing her siren song or anything because then people will know and it's a big ordeal. And her friend Effie and her family are literally struggling and fighting against literal demons from their past. The two girls are in their junior year of high school, so there's gonna of course be some, conflict that's involving high school and growing up. And there's a local siren that's on trial for murder, kind of rocks the nation. There's some tension. And during this time, Tavia accidentally lets out her siren song. So now everybody is aware she's a siren, and I have a feeling it's going to cause a lot of problems for her. This is set in Portland, Oregon as well, which is interesting. So both of these gorgeous books, again, came from my friend Sarah at Chilean Flair on Instagram. Please go give her a follow. Next up is a book that I found for $1.89 on Book Outlet. It was such an exciting find because I've been wanting to read this book. I've had it on a couple of my wish lists and I just hadn't bought it yet, but I had planned to, so to find it for $1.89 was like a huge, huge win. That is Songs from the Deep by Kelly Powell. Also another really pretty book cover. This one's kind of like a metallic shimmery thing like the water. This book is about like a local town. They have merpeople or deadly sirens in their oceans that, lurk along the shores. I think the town has kind of a fraught relationship with their sirens, and when the body of a boy washes up on the shore, basically the sirens are blamed for it. But there's one girl in town, Moira, who doesn't actually think that the sirens did it. She thinks that they've been framed, somebody's setting them up. So she kind of has to investigate, not only to save her town, but to save the sirens from unjust persecution as well. Really looking forward to this. It sounds like it's going to be interesting. Two books that are themed around blaming merpeople for So next, I have two books that unfortunately do not have the book jackets. I found them both in Little Free Libraries, two different Little Free Libraries. And I'm very excited because they're great books. First one is the start of a series. I have been putting this particular series off because I've heard that the first book is really good, the second book is good, and then the third and fourth, it kind of goes downhill. I don't know, it's hard when you're going to invest 3 or 4 books into a series, and then it's maybe not going to end in a satisfying way. I mean, I know everybody's different, so maybe I'm going to read the 4 books and really love how it's resolved and love how it's finished off. But I guess it's just kind of made me hesitant about getting started with it. That said, I found this in a Little Free Library, so I figured maybe it was finally time to read Red Queen by Victoria Aviard. And see the title there? This book features a character named Maven. Maven is a red blood. In her society, there are people that are red bloods and silver bloods. And red bloods are just kind of your standard typical people. Silver bloods have some special abilities. And because silver bloods have special abilities, they have become the rulers of society. From what I understand, which I don't know a whole ton about the plot, Maven is forced into like sort of arena, like gladiator style kind of thing, and forced to fight for her life. And in that position, she exhibits some powers that she as a red blood shouldn't have. And that just throws the whole world upside down because up until this point, silvers have had convinced red-blooded people that they don't have any special abilities. I think from there it starts some kind of conflict, and that's what goes into the next few, stories in the series. I'm looking forward to it. I've heard really great things about the first book. I hear that it's well written and exciting. Sounds like a good concept, so we'll see. And this is the book that I probably know the least about. I found it in a Little Free Library a couple weeks back. I read the title, and I was kind of like, sounds like a kid's tale. And then I saw the Book of the Month stamp on it, and that made me pause and look it up. It sounded interesting. Usually, like I said, Book of the Month has some pretty solid picks, so I thought I'd give this a chance. This was Book of the Month in July 2018, and that is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. See the title there? So the way that I understand this is that it is kind of a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, in that, it deals with money and collecting on debts. I kind of understand that the family is some sort of a merchant family, and whoever's in charge of collecting the money is doing a shit job at it. So the daughter has to step up and start busting balls and collecting the money. And somehow that translates into a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I've heard really good things about it since finding it. I did look up like Goodreads on it, and the ratings were really high. I found out that it was on a whole bunch of award-winning fantasy lists and things like that, so I'm looking forward to giving it a read. Stack number 3 has some books that I'm very excited about. One of them, well, 2 of them actually were on my November TBRs, and then 2 of them were books that I won in an Instagram giveaway. The first book is a book that I am both terrified and excited about reading. The reason being is that the author who wrote it is one of my favorite authors. Her first book was one of the best books I've read ever, and I feel like that's a lot to live up to. I don't know how you write a book that's as good or better than the one that I read last time, and I'm just worried that this is going to be a disappointment. I'm scared that I've overhyped this book in my head, but I need to get through it. I need to read it and try to enjoy it just for what it is. And that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I love The Night Circus. It's one of my all-time favorite books. It's so magical, so beautiful, and I've heard a lot of people that have read The Night Circus end up a little disappointed with this one. And then the people that haven't read The Night Circus seem to end up loving this one. So I'm trying to go in with as little information as possible, trying not to overhype it in my head, but it's hard, I'm not gonna lie. I really want to like it. This book features a character named Zachary. He finds some kind of a magical novel with a bee, a key, and a sword emblazoned on it. This leads him to 2 people, Mirabelle and Dorian, who are going to change his life. They go on some kind of adventure that involves, says, gilded ballrooms, wine-dark shores, and an intoxicating world soaked in romance and mystery. There's a battle raging over the fate of this place. So, sounds like there's going to be magic, mystery, romance, all sorts of different stuff. Honestly, it sounds good to me. I think it's going to be a good read. I want it to be a good read. Hopefully, it does not let me down. And then the next book is probably the most beautiful book on this list. This cover is just absolutely gorgeous. I was supposed to read this back in November. Like I said, I pretty much have the attention span of a teaspoon. And as soon as this got put on my TBR, all of a sudden I became not interested in reading it. That is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Aviard. Check out that beautiful cover. This book is about a pagan village and a girl named Avik. Avik is basically an outcast in her village. Her father was a Yuhuli man, and he was very loathed because he was a servant of the fanatical king. A group of woodsmen come, to collect a pagan girl for a sacrifice towards the king, and the village betrays Avik and sends her. When they're en route back to the kingdom, they're attacked, and all of the guard that has been sent for her is slaughtered, except for the captain of the guard. So now Avik and this captain have to figure out how to survive and what's going on. Sounds super cool. Beautiful cover. I definitely want to get this one done since it's been sitting on my shelves for a couple months now. And then the next 2 books came from my friend Elsie. I won a giveaway by her on Instagram, and her prize was 2 books off of your wish list. 2 books are awesome. I'm super excited about it. They're both beautiful, both in the fantasy genre, and both books that she had read and loved and said, you have to read these 2. I'm so excited for you to check them out. So I am definitely going to be reading them this month. The first one is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This book is a story about a servant named Vanya. She is a servant to the princess Giselle. She is dutiful and works hard, and then at some point she betrays Princess Giselle and steals her identity and actually lives as the princess for a period of time. She eventually is caught and tried, and this is her story. This is one of those ones that also just has such a stunning cover. I love the jacket on this. It's really pretty. Sounds like it's going to be a really fun book. And then the second book that she sent me was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. So I've seen a lot of videos about standalone fantasy books. And it's funny because most of the fantasy that I've read up until this point was within series. And I really enjoy fantasy series, but I hadn't really considered a standalone fantasy book. And so I was looking at some of these videos recommending standalone fantasies, and this one seems to crop up a ton. This seems to be a very popular recommendation, and reading the summary, I kind of understand why. So this is set in a library, which already wins me points. anytime a book is set in a bookstore, a library, what have you, I'm already giving it like +1 cool points. So it features a character named Elizabeth. Elizabeth works in this great library, and this library is full of magical grimoires that whisper on the shelves and rattle beneath iron chains. Apparently, the most dangerous grimoire gets released in an act of sabotage, and Elizabeth is trying to intervene to regain control of it and lock it back up. She has to reach out to her sworn enemy, Nathaniel Thorn, who is a mysterious sorcerer, and as they try to get this grimoire under control, it sounds like they start to learn about what's going on and what, caused it to be released in the first place. Sounds really interesting, super cool. Love a female-driven story. I'm looking forward to reading it. And our fourth and final stack. So this stack over here is either books that belong to series, or I have two duologies in here as well. First up is a book, well, it's really more of a novella than an actual novel, and it is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. Now, I feel like there's a million classic story retellings like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, all that. And in some ways, I think that they're getting a little bit overdone. This particular one sounds really interesting, though. This is A Spindle Splintered by Alexi Harrow, and you can see it's gorgeous, both inside and out. This one thing that really caught me about this one is like this book is just full of gorgeous illustrations on almost every single page. You can see throughout they've added all these nice illustrations to go with the story. I love that, and I found myself wondering while I was leafing through this why more books don't incorporate illustrations. I mean, I know that, in adult reading, we don't need pictures and this and that, and, it's about the story, but I feel like this kind of enhances the story in a way. I mean, I get that, like, adding too many pictures really increases the length, and in this case, it doesn't really matter because it's 119 pages long or something, but I wish books would utilize illustrations more. I mean, it adds so much character to the book, and in the case of fantasy, at least, it really adds to that fantasy feel. So, guys, take a page out of Alex E. Harrow's book and add some illustration to your books. I love, especially like when books have maps and things that, really enhance the world that you're reading about. Anyways, back to this story. I'll get off my soapbox about illustrations. This particular book is a Sleeping Beauty retell, but it's a feminist, modern sapphic version of Sleeping Beauty. So it features a character named Zinnia. Zinnia was the victim of an industrial accident that left her with a protein buildup disease that is basically slowly killing her. She's just about to hit her 21st birthday, and in the story, 21 is kind of set as the benchmark for when she's likely to die. Her best friend Charm organizes a Sleeping Beauty themed party because Zinnia has a Sleeping Beauty obsession, and during the party, some stuff happens, and Zinnia ends up in a Sleeping Beauty alternate universe. And like I said, there's sapphic romance, and it relies on the women to save themselves instead of, just peacefully sleeping until a man can rescue them, which my kind of retell. And then next up is a book. I received this book from Keisha from Literally Bookish, which is a great Facebook group if you need like a bookish Facebook group to join. Lots of friendly people, lots of cool book swaps and activities. And Keisha sent this to me as a Secret Santa swap with another book and a box of cookies. This particular book comes from the Caraval series. I did read the first book of Caraval back in December, like at the very beginning of December, and I really liked it. It was a fun book. I enjoyed the magical elements of it, enjoyed kind of the mystery, how it incorporated the mystery into the fantasy. I haven't read Legendary or Finale yet, but they're on my list. I may try to sneak them in this month, like via audiobook, if I have time, and then kind of save this towards the end of the month. But I have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is in the Caraval universe, but not necessarily, from what I understand, it could be read as a standalone prior to Caraval, or it could be read after Caraval. So the way that I understand it basically is that it has some characters from that series, and that the storylines kind of are relevant to each other, but not necessarily that they have to be read in tandem. So this can be a standalone, or it can be read as a prequel or a sequel, follow-up, whatever. Anyways, This also, incidentally, has the best book spine. I love that it's got this like different reflective color, matches the front cover a little bit. It's really pretty. And into the duologies, finally. So this first duology is a little bit complicated. It is probably the most beautiful set of books that I think I own, hands down. I was really, really excited when I found out about these. They are a duology of fantasy books set in South America, and that's really all I knew about them when I ordered them. After I started to do a little bit of research for my TBR and getting into what I was going to read, I found out that these particular books are based on Bolivian folklore. The author, Isabel Ibanez, is the American daughter of 2 Bolivian immigrants, and so she took, some of the folklore from her family and her parents and created this duology. So that is Woven in Moonlight and Written in Starlight. You can see these books are just absolutely stunning. Beautiful, beautiful covers. And like even the backs of them are gorgeous as well. So they're not necessarily the same story. They have a different character as the main character in each one, but they are in the same timeline. The reason that they're kind of complicated is in my research, I started reading, reviews and things on them. And to segue, basically, I spent about a month in Bolivia. By no means makes me an expert on Bolivian culture, Bolivian history, Bolivian politics, anything. Just have a baseline knowledge from spending a month there. When I was there was a lot of protests going on against Evo Morales because he had done some sketchy things to remain president. And people were pissed off. There's political protests, riots, all sorts of stuff. And because of this, I got to learn a lot about the politics and what was going on in the country. From what I've read about these books, there's some controversy because the main characters in the books are basically portrayed kind of as like the Spanish conquistadors, and then the antagonists are portrayed as like the indigenous tribes. And throughout South America, obviously, there's a history of colonialism by the Spanish conquistadors, and there's a history of racism towards indigenous people. And I haven't read these books yet, mind. This is only the criticism that I found of it. There's a criticism that they have kind of a colonial viewpoint, that they kind of support the colonial characters and vilify the indigenous characters, that there's a lack of understanding of the indigenous characters, and that they kind of play into stereotypes of Bolivian culture, Bolivian politics, etc. It's only been in the last 20 years or so that indigenous people in Bolivia have had really a voice. Evo Morales was the first indigenous president of Bolivia, and I guess what I'm getting at is that a lot of the reading I did is that these kind of rely on kind of harmful stereotypes and tropes. I haven't read them myself. I'm still going to read them because I have them. They look beautiful. The stories sound interesting, but I am going to kind of keep an eye out for that. I'm interested to see what my perception is. Do I perceive it as these are fun stories, or do I see the points that people are making about the colonialism and the kind of vilification of indigenous tribes? I'll be interested in reading both of these and seeing if I, pick up on those issues, or, if they're maybe overblown. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, I'm not Bolivian. I have limited knowledge of it. Just facing this on my travels and my limited knowledge, I'm curious to see, where I fall on this. And then the last duology that I have is probably the set that I'm the most excited about. They are Lobizona and Cazadora by Romina Garber. These books are based on Argentinian folklore. So book 1 is about Manuela Azul, and she's living in the United States as an undocumented immigrant on the run from her father's Argentinian crime syndicate. She's confined to a small apartment in Miami, and she's not really loving life. And then her surrogate grandmother is attacked. Her mother is arrested by ICE. She's left to fend for herself. And while she's fending for herself, she kind of follows this weird, mysterious emblem, and it leads her to a secret about her past and all the stuff that was going on with her father and his criminal past. She finds out that she has brujas and lobizons in her family. So if you don't speak Spanish, bruja means witch and lobizon means werewolf. And there's all sorts of rules about lobizons, like you're supposed to be the 7th son of this and, whatnot. So Manu, she starts to uncover her own story, traces her real heritage all the way back to a cursed city in Argentina, and she learns it's not just her US residency that's illegal, it's her entire existence. This sounds like it's going to be fantastic. I have a sneaking suspicion that she's going to find out that she's a werewolf. The reason that I feel that way is because the title Lobisona, it basically is the feminine for werewolf. In the description, they make it sound that only men can be werewolves, but if it was a male werewolf, it would be Lobison, right? But because it's Lobisona, it implies that she's a female werewolf. And so I have a feeling that that's going to be the mystery, is she's going to be a werewolf, she's not supposed to be a werewolf, and that's what's kicking things off. We will see, though. And then book 2, Cazadora, is a follow-up to Lobisona. Manu and her friends cross the mythical border into Carana, a cursed realm in Argentina, searching for allies and hiding place. They're going to be chasing down leads about the Coven, which is a mythical resistance manada that might not even exist. The Cazadores chase down leads about Manu, setting up traps to capture and arrest her. So, Cazadora in Spanish means huntress. Same thing, if you took the A off, it would be a male hunter, but because of the A, it makes it huntress. And it's going to be really interesting. This series sounds really good. Like I said, both books are just stunning. So many stunning books in the fantasy spectrum. Like I said, even if you don't like fantasy, we can all acknowledge that these books are just gorgeous. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. Latin America is a region that really fascinates me. I spent a little over a year in South and Central America, and so seeing fantasy series being set in South American countries really makes me happy. For a long time, I feel like fantasy has been very Euro-based, particularly like white European-based. I feel like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't read, Game of Thrones because it has kind of a European perspective, but I think that the world is so rich and there's so many complex and beautiful sets of mythology around the world. It's so exciting for me to see books that are written in the fantasy realm, but from different perspectives. I love the incorporation of local folklore from different places. I'm not, again, suggesting that people don't read Lord of the Rings because, the characters are kind of Anglo, but I do think that it's nice to start incorporating books that are, from different perspectives, different worlds. And then I was going to talk about a book too. So I think that is all of the books on my TBR for the month. 20 of them. I know that's a lot. I'm going to be doing my best to finish all of them. I have actually completed 2 already. So I am feeling pretty good. I think this is doable. I'll let you know how it goes at the end of the month. If you like this video or you like the unicorn onesie, hit the thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books. I want to hear all about it. Tell me, not the spoilers, of course, but tell me if you loved them, how you felt about them. Tell me if you hated them. If there's a book on here that you think sucked, let me know. I want to know everything. Is there any books as well that should be on here that are not? Like, what's your favorite fantasy book? Standalone, series, whatever. Send them my way. And finally, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button. Other than that, I hope to see you in other videos. My name is Caitlin Bandy. This is Bandy's Books. Thanks.